Good morning, everyone. We are back with more Barnstable This Morning. I'm Sarah Colvin, and joining me on the phone, I welcome our Cape and Island State Senator Dan Wolf. Senator Wolf, good morning and happy birthday to you.
Thank you, Sarah. They're not, with each passing year, I wouldn't say they're all happy, but I appreciate that.
That's right. I think I enjoy birthdays, and I think that it's a day that you just get to do whatever you want, right? So I'll give you a free pass today to do whatever you want.
That we could have a free flowing conversation. That having laid that as a ground rule, but let's go.
That could be a little dangerous, but so let's talk Dan a little bit about. Of course, the formal session is over. Tell me a little bit about the things that you were pleased that happened, and then perhaps some things that you wish had passed that did not, or still.
Yeah, I mean, a ton of legislation got done in the end, and that's the good news because as you and I discussed over the past year and a half, there have been times when moving legislation through has been agonizingly slow. So we did a lot of bills the last weekend. I think, Sarah, as you and I discussed, because of the Republican convention and then the Democratic convention the last 2 weeks of July, instead of being in during the weeks, we were in both weekends. So we didn't actually finish until about 12:30 a.m. last Monday. We ran the clock out at the end of July, which was last Sunday, and had in the 2 days probably 20 hours of in session working on bills. The big bills that were sort of hanging at the end, we had an energy bill, which was in conference committee. We did finally pass a bill which was much less ambitious than the Senate version, much more ambitious than the House version. So I think the conference committee tried to meet in the middle there. We had a so-called municipal modernization bill, which was a fairly technical bill, working with the municipalities and the towns to try to get some relief and some regulatory changes so that they could function better and do their work.
Sure, and that was
we had a so-called economic development bill, which again came out of conference committee and got passed. Not nearly as ambitious as I would have liked to see, but it was a good bill. We had a transportation network company bill, so-called TNC, which was the Uber legislation, really a consumer protection bill, which didn't deal with any of the labor issues involved with those companies, and I was disappointed to see that. Again, it came out of a conference committee. And then finally we had a conference committee, as I think you and I discussed, on the whole issue of non-competes and whether we should eliminate, ban, or restrict the use of non-competes in the labor market here in Massachusetts. And that I was a conferee on that conference committee, and we were unable to reach a compromise, so that died in committee, and we didn't get a bill there done. So all of that legislation, because the bills that I just mentioned, especially the first three, were very technical, very complicated, and really you could call them omnibus bills, meaning that they included a lot of diverse topics within them. So I think I'm proud that we were able to get that work done. I'm frustrated that we didn't. We did it under the gun of time, which always makes the outcomes, I think, not as good as they could be if we had really deliberated for longer and had a better back and forth. So, that's the good, the bad, and the ugly of the last weekend.
Exactly, and it certainly is challenging, when you try to squeeze all of those approvals, all of that discussion into weekends. And as I've said to your colleagues, I really give you guys a lot of credit for spending weekends up in Boston in the State House working on legislation, especially during the height of the summer season here on Cape Cod. Certainly a lot of credit goes to you.
I appreciate you saying that, but, unless you're a little bit critical, you don't improve things. And looking forward, I'm not going to be there, but looking forward, that work could have been done in January, February, March, April, May, June, and the first half of July. So,
now, what is it that causes that backlog? I think, obviously by nature we're procrastinators as people, but is there kind of some sort of a rhyme or reason as to why everything is kind of packed into those last few weeks of the session?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, first of all, the process itself is a little bit lengthy because all of these were amended bills and reform bills that had been filed at the beginning of the session 2 years ago. And they all have to have hearings. And then after they have hearings, which are joint committee hearings, they then have to be rewritten and reformulated. And then they have to go to the floor, either in the House or the Senate, get passed there after amendment, go to the other branch for passage and amendment, then go to conference committee, and then get worked out in conference, and then go back to both chambers. So in the best of all cases, it's probably about a 6-month process. So what you got to do if you don't want the clock to be running out is you've really got to plan better. We do that in business all the time, but if you know it's a 6-month process, you got to get on these bills a lot earlier in the session. And I think there's a commitment from the Senate next session to do that, especially some of the hangover bills that almost got done but didn't quite get done at the 11th hour. So it's a question of planning and getting them done quicker.
Sure.
If you really lay out the Senate and the House bills, what you'll see is the Senate, I think, probably was a little bit further ahead of the clock on a lot of the bills that we got done, and we sent them over to the House. So, I hope that both chambers get along better next session. There was a little bit of acrimony there, but I hope both chambers focus on when they get along better to move things quicker and earlier, because it's better legislation if it's not done under the gun that way.
Sure. So you mentioned there were, and we've talked about the non-compete contracts, that you were unable to reach a compromise on that. Other kind of bills that are lingering that didn't get finished up that you're hoping to see come back. I think by the time the formal session begins again, you will no longer be a part of the group at the State House. But in terms of the things that you would really like to see your colleagues continue to work on.
Well, the biggest one, and I'll just focus on that one because there are a handful of them, but the biggest one is the paid family leave. It is the case in Massachusetts, and it's the Commonwealth and the country is the only civilized societies in the world right now that if a woman gives birth to a baby on Wednesday, if she doesn't go into work on Thursday, she's not guaranteed of getting paid that week. And we know how many people are living on the edge financially, and it's almost barbaric that we live in a society where a woman has a baby on Wednesday, and if she doesn't go to work on Thursday, may not be able to feed the family at the end of the week. That's just crazy. The Senate at the end passed a very ambitious paid family leave bill, and I would say between the so-called business community, and I say so-called because our business has always offered this benefit, and we've been able to be successful, but the so-called business community, as represented by the Association of Industries in Massachusetts and the National Federation of Independent Businesses and others, killed that bill in the House. And as I've said before, the so-called business community has too much influence in the House of Representatives in Massachusetts. For them to be able to call leadership in the House and prevent legislation like that from getting done is an embarrassment to our government, if you ask me. So I would love to see paid family leave be at the front of the agenda next session. The Senate has already passed the bill, so I assume that on the Senate side, they'll be able to move it quickly. Hopefully, by the time we get to summer of next year, a year from now, and the House can and should take it up, and they'll get a lot of pressure from outside the building, as they should, and maybe we'll move it. I would also like to see significant tax reform in Massachusetts, and specifically, the Senate has been pushing hard to expand the Earned Income Tax Credit. That would have to initiate in the House, because any so-called money bills that involve changes in tax code have to start in the House. So I would hope that next session the governor would file in his budget, or the House would have in theirs, some expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit, because that is a way of supporting those poor and working families in Massachusetts that have not recovered since the Great Recession of 2009 and are still really struggling. So if I had to focus on two things, both of those are supporting our poor and working families who really continue to get hammered by this economy in spite of the campaign rhetoric you read about how we fixed it. It's still not a generous economy for most of the people who need it. I'd really like to see the focus go there early next session, and that would be my hope. And even though I'm not a legislator, I know how to use the telephone, so we'll see.
Absolutely. You are a citizen, a constituent. Very important. So, now that the formal session is over, what is going to be, Senator Wolf, your focus for the next few months?
Well, as you know, a lot of bills can get done, so-called smaller bills, in informal session. So even though we're not in formal session, there are a lot of bills, especially those that are of local importance to some of the towns that I represent, that can be passed in an informal session. And the way that process works is that the bill goes to the chamber, it's read, and as long as there are no objections to it, the bill can get passed quietly in an informal session. Many of those bills, they might be land takings, for example, that are important to the towns, or enabling legislation. A lot of those bills can still get done between now and the end of the year. So our office will be focused on making sure that we're as responsive as we can be to our cities, towns, and to our constituents in our respective districts. So a lot of work to go on. And the other thing is that our office is still open for constituent services. And we overlook that a lot, but to me, it's really the most important part of the job we do is helping people who need assistance from the government but don't know where to go, connecting them with the right departments and getting them the assistance and the help and the understanding that they need to navigate anything from housing issues to healthcare issues. It's an important part of what we do, and we'll stay engaged in that as well in the months ahead.
And Dan, what's the best way for your constituents to get in touch with you should they want to ask questions or connect?
Please do, because our office staff is still there, and we're not working on a lot of the bigger legislation, so we have the capacity. Our number at the State House is area code 617-722-1570. That's 617-722-1570. Or people can email me at Senator Dan Wolf at MA.gov, or ma.gov, I guess it is.
Yes.
Pretty easy to find. If you go to the Massachusetts State Senate website, you can link to any of the senators. So
fantastic.
That's always a good way to get us to.
Excellent. Well, Senator Wolf, I thank you so much, as always, for joining us here on Barnstable This Morning. Thank you so much, and happy birthday again. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot there. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.